Let's see. So, I'm not to your essays yet, of course. I told y'all that ahead.
I've been looking. I literally look every hour.
I would not do that at all. Like, in fact, you shouldn't even start looking until this coming weekend. Like I'd say Sunday, and I don't know why you would look in the first place. Doesn't it give you an email notification when a paper gets graded?
I don't check.
I don't get an email on stuff.
Almost all my students have told me what they love about Blackboard is that it sends you notifications whenever a paper gets graded.
I get notifications
Mine does.
on
If it
every
does, I don't
other thing besides when my papers are graded.
I just accept the fact
Oh
that
yeah,
you'll
it
get to
doesn't
it
tell me
later.
when anyone comments on my discussion posts.
It doesn't,
It does not.
even though you ask it to.
Yeah.
It is what it is, I guess. But I'm sorry about started late. Some people heard, but I had to go make a call to my doctor real quick. They called me back during the last class, even though I told them not to call me back at 12:15. They called me back, so I had to call them back.
No complaints.
So I did that, and I still didn't get through it on the disc. Still got a voicemail, so they're probably gonna call me back immediately because classes started. So the papers are not graded yet, but they're on the way to being graded. And I wouldn't even start checking until like Sunday. I feel like you're just going to waste a whole lot of your time if you do that. Because it's not, I don't even think, I don't see, if I manage to by Wednesday figure out that I'm going to get to your papers any earlier than Sunday, I'll let you know, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I went ahead and did the Britlet papers first because there were like 6 papers. And I was like, I can knock those out and feel like I've accomplished something. And then I went and did their discussion posts last night for you guys. So those are all done. And because I need to make notes about it too for class. Then there was, I was doing the essays throughout the day for English 1301, and I think I started out with 127 and knocked it down to 78. So however many that is. 41, 49, 50, 39, I don't know, something like that. Math, right?
Who does that anymore?
Math teachers. Let's see. So essays are just on the way to being graded. I usually can grade about anywhere between 4 and 6 a day during the week. We'll see if I can do any more than that and then have more to grade in the week. I can grade more on the weekend. I always push myself. It's one of the things I never stop doing. Pushing
That's what I did when I was on swing set. I always push myself.
Never stop, never stopping. That's my motto. If it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. That's the only decoration I have in my room. It says exactly what it means.
I'm so confused.
If something's worth doing, it's also worth overdoing, and that's how I live my life.
Oh, I see now.
So at least your discussion posts are graded, so that's good. Are there any questions you guys have before we get started? Because we're just gonna probably just talk about literature all day then. We didn't get a whole lot of chance to talk about literature last week, but we're gonna get a lot of literature talk this week.
Yay.
Literature.
When is the critical evaluate or critical analysis day?
Next
I'm saying next Sunday.
next Thursday.
Next Thursday, so
Tuesday.
week 5 day too.
Well, technically,
There is a day when I talk about how to do that a little bit more, but
it's
I usually wait until next week to do it.
The big
on the
question.
on the syllabus it says Wednesday, but we all know it's Thursday.
For the Launchpad assignments, the PJC library one, do we wait to discuss that in class or just go ahead and do it now?
We actually don't have a library presentation,
Okay,
so
so we
you could
just
just go
do it
ahead and do it now. It doesn't matter as long as they all get completed. You'll get 100 for them anyway. So even if you manage to get a couple wrong on that, it's not gonna affect you too negatively. We are using the databases this semester, but not until the research paper. That's the only time we use them at all. So not a huge problem there. Oh, I did change the way the quizzes work again. I went back to the old way. The reason I did that was because it turns out I never consulted with students who do their quizzes. The people who have always told me, yeah, I can't see what quizzes I haven't done. That's because you can always see quizzes you have done after you've graded them, after they're graded. And I didn't know that. I assumed that because these students told me, yeah, none of my quizzes are there. It's because they hadn't done any of them. So they couldn't tell which ones they were missing because they never knew they had them in the first place and never tried to do them. That was why they would always say that. My students were like, no, after it's graded, like the grade's always there. I was like, what? They're like, yeah. I was like, well, that's stupid. Then why did I change it? Because the problem I was having was some students were like, hey, I missed a quiz because I was gone. Can you reopen it for me? Because I was out of town. I was like, sure, I'll do that. And it wouldn't. I would put the exception in like I always do that says this student only can do it, but it wouldn't let them because it would let them click it and see it, and then once they got there, it would say due date passed, and I was just like, this is useless. Like, why am I making an exception if it doesn't do anything? And what I did was just went back to the old way. Now that I found out students said, oh no, they always show up if you've done them. I was like, well, then I want to reward the people who have done stuff, like not the other way around. So I went, like, I think reversed all the orders. Let me see, did I do that? Let's take a look. They reversed all the order back. Oh my gosh. That's 1301. What about 1302?
Actual quiz over the reading.
Yeah.
After we attempted the first time and went back to see what questions we got wrong, it wouldn't show us what questions we got wrong.
Right. It should show you only. You're saying it wouldn't show you what the real answer was, or wouldn't show you even if you got a question wrong at
It wouldn't
all?
show us if we got the question wrong.
Mhm.
It just went back to the beginning page. But when we did the quiz yesterday,
It
it
did.
showed us what questions we got
It's like,
wrong.
oh, you got questions 4 and 5 wrong, or.
Oh, interesting.
7 and 8
Yeah.
wrong.
Let me see.
What is this?
Marker. Let's see. This particular one says score per question and what answer you submitted. That's actually more than I even want us to have it show. And that was for this one? Is that right?
Yeah, the first one that we took, it told us our grade, but then when we tried to look to see, oh, what did we get wrong, because, we didn't know, it didn't even start to show us what we got wrong.
See, that's really weird because I
See,
have it
mine
set to
did.
do that.
Mine
Yeah,
did. Mine
ours-
said 0 out of 10 points instead of 10 out of 10
Yeah,
points.
ours
So like you knew
didn't,
which one
it
you got
didn't
wrong.
show us that, but when this last test it did.
Yeah, on the
Weird.
first one, it showed us like, oh, you got, like, the scoring, you got a 90 out of 100, but it didn't show us, like, question 1, 2, 3, it didn't show any of the bottom stuff.
Maybe that was because of the way I was doing
I was thinking.
like the way I had made the change. Maybe that was why.
Yeah, because this one yesterday worked right for us.
It might have just been because making the change in the first place was what caused all the problems.
Okay.
But who knows? Huh?
Are we always gonna be one step behind on the quizzes from the reading? So like the reading that we read for this last week, the Soldier's Home and all that one, the quiz is for next week.
Right.
It's gonna always be that way?
Always that way,
Wait,
yeah.
yeah. Wasn't it this past weekend?
This past weekend was the quiz over O'Connor,
okay,
Ellison, and
Amanda.
O'Connor.
Okay, that's right. I see.
Because we just got done talking about it, and so then you could complete the quiz. I just want to make sure people they've heard as much stuff as possible to get the quiz done. Additionally, sometimes people run out of time. They're like, crap, I didn't have time to read that story, like if it's on a Sunday. But over the course of that week, you may find the time to read the story, and then we talk about it in class, and so then you're able to do the quiz. And discussion post only requires having knowledge of one story anyway. So that's why I make it the quiz sort of at the end of the week.
I'm glad we do the quizzes at the end of the week after we discuss everything.
Me too. That's because I designed it. It fits with my designs.
Did you put a new koozie on a koozie that already started to camp?
What? I've always had a koozie on this thing.
Oh.
Yeah. It is a different one maybe than the last time you saw it. I don't know or noticed.
I don't know. It just looked different.
It's been on there for a couple weeks. So today's. Oh, any other questions before we move on? We're going to talk about how to do critical analysis in a little more detail. Probably next week. I mean, I might do it start the second day of this week, but I don't know. Let's have to see if there's a need. I usually can do it pretty quick. We'll see. So this week was. We could leave it up. I don't know. We can make it bigger. That would be helpful, wouldn't it?
It would be very helpful.
So we can see. Boom. So we have Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, Soldier's Home, and Paper Menagerie.
Those are
I liked. Oh, all of them, of course. Let me see. Who wrote? Let me see. What do we have? We had 6 on Soldiers Home discussion posts. We had 8 on Omelas, and only 3 on Paper Menagerie. I don't know why. Maybe it's because people have the book and they're like, I'll just read this out of the
I
book.
think it's because it's the online version.
Usually whenever I do
I found an
discussion
audiobook of
posts,
Paper Menagerie, so I listened to it.
usually
Yeah, that's.
I found an audiobook on it.
I
typically listen to audiobooks.
I just read it.
Walking away from Omelas.
If you read it and
So
listen to the
interesting.
audio, it helps like tremendously for you remembering what's going on.
I find audiobooks to be atrocious,
Well,
and I hate listening to
I'm
them.
only doing it for the online stories because I can't read on my phone or on my computer because it just hurts my eyes too much.
I like audiobooks because it helps with my dyslexia, so.
I like audiobooks
Makes
because I don't
sense.
understand if I read it on my own, so.
I can't stay focused.
Yeah, I just like I'll be reading it, but I'll be thinking about like what I'm gonna have for dinner.
You can't stay focused when you're reading with your eyes?
Yeah.
Yes.
I can't stay focused when I'm expected to listen to
I
something.
can't just listen, I listen and read. I do both.
Well, I'll follow along in the book while I listen. But if
When
I
I'm
just
looking
sit
with-
there and try to read it, I'll be thinking of 1,000 different things.
See, that's so weird. When I'm looking with my eyes,
I can do both.
if I get lose track of something, I can go, oh, let me go back, and I read again.
Yeah.
If I'm on an audiobook, I can't just skip back 15 seconds or 40 seconds.
Yeah, that doesn't
Yeah.
work for dyslexia. Just to go back and read, because I don't know where it was. I messed up.
I imagine dyslexia comes with its own concerns, yeah.
I just do it because it helps me remember what I read.
So you mentioned how much you liked Paper Menagerie first,
Yeah.
but almost nobody wrote about it. So, and I didn't even have your comments were actually on Paper Menagerie.
Paper Menagerie, yeah.
Yeah, you did write about Paper Menagerie. Very few, but and Brittany did too. So did Ethan, but he's not in this class. Let me see. Is that where we want to start? Is with Paper Menagerie?
So on that.
Because I know Brittany and Jamie have read it, but I don't know whether people have had a chance to peruse that one yet.
I have not.
I'm probably talking about Omelas
Okay.
first,
Or Soldiers
since that had the most comments.
Omelas did have the most comments. I think I feel it most. I don't know.
It was an interesting
I almost feel like we should start with Soldiers Home and just go over it real briefly, and then move on to Omelas because it has the most places to go. Because while we did have less people talked about it, it means we can cover it quicker. And I feel like less people have read Paper Menagerie, and it's one of those stories you don't really want to talk about until people have read it.
Yeah.
Whereas Soldiers Home isn't really like that.
You could really
Omelas
confuse
isn't really like
somebody
that.
with that one.
True, yeah. So Soldiers Home. A lot of people end up using this for the research paper usually. What did you guys want to say about Soldiers Home? I mean, was there anything that stuck out to you or that you'd wanted to mention? It's a little bit. It's a sad story.
Yeah.
Elaborate.
So just the way that he was treated and how he didn't feel that he was at home anymore because of how long he had been gone. Everything had changed for him. So he didn't feel right being there, basically.
It almost seemed like nothing worked right for him. Like he came late after the big welcome and everything. Nobody wanted to hear his stories.
And
So he
would
wasn't
just
able to
lie
work
about
through
it.
a lot of it, yeah.
And I feel just to make people happy, just to make it sound less terrible. And so I thought it was just sad because it shows that sometimes it can really be like that for actual veterans that do come also. And so.
I know it was like that for like a lot of the people who came from the Vietnam War.
Yeah, and for me, that's what made the story so sad, is because I could relate it to actual life. And so, and I also want to go into the service, and so that's another reason why it kind of hit home for me.
That was actually one of the questions that I had. Sort of was following along with, like you said that he was not treated with the others, and you made that comment too about just now. But you made it on a discussion post. Now he wasn't treated like the other people because he came home later, and so he didn't get to kind of have that hero's welcome. He was sort of like this cast off that was afterwards. But I've wondered too. I mean, there were other guys that were also in the war and saw the same horrible things. Like when they came back, like granted he probably has it worse, but I mean, would it have actually been better for him? Not better for him. When I say better, I guess I mean, would he have not had the problems that he's having now at all had he just arrived earlier?
I don't think he would not have those problems at all, but I think it might have helped a little because I felt like he felt like he was an outcast and that he wasn't important. And that's why he would lie about the things and he didn't want to talk to anybody while he wanted to stay at home. And I do feel like that would have helped with those problems because he felt like an outcast. And so him being treated like that at the beginning kind of set up for him feeling like that through the whole story and like.
Okay. It kind of makes you. I mean, granted, Hemingway wasn't writing about Vietnam, and he was already dead by the time Vietnam started happening. But it makes you wonder. Like, it seems like Vietnam, almost everybody who came home was having problems with this, not just the occasional.
Because a lot of Americans were not happy with them ever going over there. Then the way I see it is like, well, hey, they're soldiers. Their job is to follow orders. You shouldn't be angry, getting angry at the soldiers for doing it. You should get angry at the people who order them to go over there. Because and then the way they got treated. So anytime I meet a veteran from Vietnam, I thank them for their service. I let them know that we are, even though maybe it was one of those wars that really this wasn't necessary, but they still went over them. They still fought. We don't need to treat them like they're any less of a soldier and a hero than what they. I mean, not everyone that was angry at them had never seen war, so. It frustrates me that people would treat our own soldiers in such a way.
Yeah, for sure.
I have to agree with that.
My grandma was actually in Vietnam, and he still, like, to this day, doesn't like to call himself a veteran.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I feel like a little bit has to do with that he probably agreed that they shouldn't have been over there.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, there's nothing you can do when you're in the military.
Yeah.
You're supposed to go
You get an
somewhere,
order,
you go.
you go. If you don't follow orders, it's going to end up being bad for you.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling that the soldiers there really kind of felt the same way that they shouldn't have
That's
been
why
there.
that's why everyone when they came back they shouldn't have reaffirmed for them. They should have been like, glad you're back. We know you probably didn't want to be over there, but there's nothing you can do
And
about
even
that.
though they didn't want them to be over there, still thank them and still, you know.
Yes, thank them
And
for
people just forget that
for
basically now.
fighting anyways.
Right.
I mean, we have not agreed with how your superiors were doing this, but we're thankful that we still had someone to fight, and we still do.
I think a lot of people too with that, it's like they heard the horror stories of what was going on over there and equated that to, that's what every soldier is doing.
Yeah.
They took that for the bad percent and equated it to the 100,
They
which
took it from
you can't
like
do that. They're
the
not
far
all
left.
doing that.
I always found the decisions of that war to be, I don't know, interesting.
Did you know
That was an
Wolverine
interesting
was in
choice.
Vietnam?
There's a what?
Wolverine fought in Vietnam.
Who?
Logan Wolverine.
Oh,
Marvel,
okay.
He fought in Vietnam. I thought it was getting a little too serious. I had to, lighten the mood a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, World War I, which is the one that he was in here, I mean, it had no man's land. It had, like, the barbed wire, and I believe it also had the introduction of chemical warfare, right? Which, is now against the Geneva Convention, but back then, people were, what was the Agent Orange or whatever? That was causing people to, like, their lungs were melting from the inside out. So you could have seen some horrific things, I would think, no matter whether you were a Krebs or whether you were any of the other people. I guess it was just worse because he helped clean up afterwards and realized exactly how bad the devastation was. I don't know. I just feel like I feel like the PTSD of it all would have still been there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
No matter what. So I do find it interesting that we focus on Krebs, and I've wondered if that maybe because Hemingway is associated. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but Hemingway has been called Big Papa. He's an author that big barrel chested, like he loved to go out and like trophy hunt. Literally his persona was so large, it like his characters and his stories became equated with him. And he at one time actually thought that he was being followed by the CIA or the FBI, and it turned out he actually was. Because because his life was just so crazy. It started making him go paranoid at the end of his life. He was actually right. So I wonder if he chose somebody that he would have considered to be the exception, because he wanted to actually be in the military, but he had, I think, one of those like club foot problems or some kind of problem where he couldn't be. So he drove a medic van or something like that, or like a medicine hospital van type deal.
Ambulance?
Huh?
Ambulance or?
It was like an ambulance, but I think it had like more capability, or like it might have been an ambulance. Yeah. Maybe I'm just overthinking it. But he drove one of those in the war instead, and he always tried to get involved with war efforts. Because he just had, I don't know, he had this sort of like old school, like masculine kind of persona. It makes me wonder if he chose somebody who had been through something extreme, because he would have equated the, average person who went to World War I and they come back and they get the hero's welcome to more or less be okay because they can tell their stories. I don't know. I just feel like many of the people who went would have seen some stuff too, and I wonder like how it would have been different if we'd gotten like, say, the average person's perspective. I find it especially interesting as well, considering that I always like to show people this when. So if we go to, by the way, I think we're in Paris, Texas right now. I always find that funny. Where did this story take place? It took place in some town in Kansas City is talked about as well as, but the main setting is like a town in.
We have greater moral obligations to robots. What?
Probably the wrong story.
Just the first thing I opened to.
Did someone say Oklahoma? Oklahoma.
It's in Kansas.
Kansas, Oklahoma.
There's somewhere in Kansas. I'm trying to find the name of the
They're
town.
legitimately in
Is
Kansas,
it Kansas
Oklahoma.
City, Oklahoma? Which never made sense to me.
There's a
It actually, let me see in the book.
Kansas City.
Georgia.
Oklahoma is mentioned.
It is in
I
Kansas
think
City?
I don't think it's Oklahoma
So,
City,
I was
but
right. I actually didn't read that far. Because he.
I know it's there if I can find it.
Kansas
Super
City
small.
Star.
I don't know why I just didn't
Oh,
pull
wait, it is
it.
Oklahoma. He
I really hate that my
Kansas
book's
City.
not
He
that
went to
small.
war from a Methodist college in Kansas, but his hometown is in
Oh, that's right.
Oklahoma.
Right, that's what it was. So when he ends up going back home with his parents, that's going to be in Oklahoma. So one thing I always like to kind of point out is I find that it's interesting to me the choice to make him the exception when it seems like it'd be more effective to make him like one of the average people, because I don't know, maybe not. I'm sure Hemingway knew what he was doing, but since he won that like Nobel Prize and everything. But I find it interesting to note here that this is Oklahoma in what year? Like 19. It's like just after World War I, so 1919. Something very, very important happened in Oklahoma after this, fairly soon in history. That became a cause for a lot of problems. And what was that? A lot of American problems during and around World War II were the result of something bad happening in Oklahoma. Don't think of a single isolated event. Think of something that was more of a condition.
Not the.
I
I know this. Never mind.
Sorry, I
It's
think I'm
gonna
on the
sound
wrong
stupid.
page.
Say what you're going to say.
Mm-mm.
I can tell you whether it's stupid, and I'll probably tell you that it's not stupid no matter what you say.
It's not
It's not a sandstorm, was it?
just
The
be
thing
A what
that-
now?
The sandstorm that happened where people were like trapped in their homes a long time ago.
Kind of. I mean, it wasn't just like a sandstorm, but it was the situation that brought about the sandstorm. Yeah, the Dust Bowl.
Oh, for real?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
So, I mean, it's the whole basis of the novel Grapes of Wrath by Steinbeck, who I think also won a Nobel Prize. But this is before that. So we always maybe think of Oklahoma as kind of a dry place, a dusty place. I'm sure they have like, farming and stuff there now that's a lot better than it was. But as a result of over farming and not doing crop rotation properly, Oklahoma and a lot of this area of the United States turned into like the Dust Bowl shortly after the setting of the story. However, at this time, it would have been farmed aplenty. Oklahoma would have been a great place. It would have been fertile. It would have been like a most fertile part of like America in some senses. So I find it interesting that it's set here in Oklahoma in the fertile home of America at this time. And he wrote it before it had the Dust Bowl, so he would have only been thinking about it as a fertile, like, center of America. And if you look, it's like dead center in America. So it's like if you draw a line from here to here to Florida, that line goes through Oklahoma. If you draw a line from Maine to California, it just about hits the tip of there, and hits Kansas definitely. Going on a line that way. So that the dead center of America, if you look like geographically, like on a line, is probably, where did I say? Probably like here-ish. So like the Kansas-Oklahoma area. And what I think that means, like all these people seem very unconcerned with the war. If you think about it, even today, like the people worry that even Dallas, Texas is going to get hit by a nuclear bomb. Not really. Even nuclear, I mean, which would have a big impact. I mean, nobody's going to storm our shores. We're too damn big. Like, there's not, well, you couldn't, I think it's one of the reasons that, China was communist as well, but we went after Vietnam because they were accessible. We thought, well, we can get to Vietnam. We can't. It's almost like I'm really mad at somebody's, like this big old guy that's too big for me to beat up. I can't get to him, so I'll just punch his kid. Like, that's kind of how it's, like, he can't fight back. And then it turns out the kid is really good at hiding, and you can't get him. And it turns out I thought I could punch the kid, but I've been swinging and swinging. Now I'm exhausted. And
China's little kid.
It kind of is. I mean, it was a communist country, too. It was like, well, we're going to stop communism. It's kind of hard to beat something, too, that's... If you look at like all the like alien movies we've ever had, all the alien races always operate as a collective, right? They're always some civilization that seems to function as one single unit, like this one social unit. And I've always thought that that's sort of like a communist thing, like they're communists, like they don't operate on individualism, they operate on like a social principle, like where they all just function as one unit. And that's sort of what was going on in Vietnam. It was they would just hide and like they were all operating sort of together. Like, how do you beat an entire ideology of a nation? It's very difficult to do such a thing. You can't appeal to their rugged individualism because they don't have that. They have a collectivity. Same with China as well. Or they did. They're starting to have some people who are feeling American now. And it's actually very popular to do, like, American weddings. Did you know that a traditional, like, Chinese wedding, like, you don't even... Like, the groom and the bride say nothing.
They stand there?
Other people talk. They just stand there, yeah. They've started doing, some people started like doing a trend of getting like American weddings and like where they actually speak and they're like, and I have to like, what, share my feelings about her? Like it's very strange for like people who do it, but like there's people who like, they pay to like put on American weddings. It's very strange. But the individualism we have here, and sort of partly, I think, too, the isolation that we have from the rest of the world we don't often worry about wars, even though 9/11 happens, and let's be honest, we weren't really worried that anybody's going to hit Dallas. The times we have to worry and what causes people to worry are the problems we have from within. Shooters, mass shooters, school shooters. Those are the kind of things we worry about, is the extremism of people who are already here. And I'm sure there's people who convince people that immigrants are dangerous, but there's no data to support that. Yes, drugs come from other countries, but...
You could say citizens of Texas are dangerous.
Huh? I mean, you say citizens of anywhere are dangerous, but specifically when they looked at data of different cities that had immigrant populations, I can't remember this. It was like, it was when there was an immigration explosion at some point, they looked at the crime rates in cities as a result of immigration changes. And what they found was, while the murder rate, I think, ticked up slightly, I think it was negligible. Most crime rates actually went down slightly, and in some cases went way down. But that was in only a few different areas, like major cities areas. I don't know about rural areas. But for the most part, America just doesn't have to worry because we have so much land in the middle, and we're a huge country. And like if somebody like attacked California, I mean, first of all, I mean we're so far, it's not gonna like what's that gonna do to us? And second of all, you'd probably have a bunch of Texans going good. They deserve it. Take that, Hollywood, all your celebrities. But I think it is kind of. I think a lot of like we are sort of in a different scenario though, because I don't know if you know this, but 66% of the population of the United States lives within 100 miles of a major body of water, whether that be the Great Lakes or the Pacific or Atlantic Oceans. Not even the border, but the ocean specifically. So within 100 miles.
Whenever you look at a map of like a nighttime view of the United States, you got all the lights up there, all the lights along the coast, and in the center it's just dark.
Yeah.
A little closer here, a little closer here. Does anyone have an objection to turning that fan on?
I actually do, because I found out that the videos from last week, when the fan was running, was hitting my microphone and causing it to go. And it really made the editing hard for me to do because I was having to like essentially ignore this crunkling sound. You ever seen like an old like VHS camcorder video of like a sports event,
Yeah.
like kids playing soccer or something, and the whole time you're watching, you can't hear anything. You hear like a little bit of shouting going, but mostly what you hear the whole time is of like somebody hitting a microphone, or like the wind hitting the microphone over and over again. And that was what my whole class sounded like when I was sitting there editing it. I had to find one where the fan was off in order to like use it. It was just so awful. The worst was in that ITV room when I had the Brit Lit class.
Oh, ITVs are off.
Well, it wasn't so bad. It was the fan was literally blowing right at my computer, so that was where it was the loudest. It was like the whole time I was like, it was like my computer had a stutter, and I was like having to listen to it. No offense if you've ever had a stutter. It was just, it's sometimes to be hard to listen. I think it's interesting to note that while a lot of people at the borders might be worried about things like wars, maybe that's why rural America is so pro-military, but like I've never thought about that. I wonder if that's, like, we don't really have to worry about being stormed, but like, California is very like, we don't want big wars. And New York too. I don't know. Maybe that's not necessarily true because North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, they all generally go Republican as well as the Gulf. It's a terrible theory. So this part of America though, and we're not too worried about getting attacked now. Like who's going to attack Dallas, Texas? Like who's going to be able to get to Dallas, Texas? But think about that. This is 1919. That's pre-internet.
Yeah.
If you heard anything, it was on a radio. If your family had one. Word of mouth, seeing a soldier come back in uniform. I mean, these people, the girls that he was watching, that he would like to get with, but it wasn't like the girls in the foreign countries where they didn't speak your language, you didn't speak their language. You just had sex, and then it was over, which is what he kind of wanted to come back to. But these girls all have things like, feelings and personalities. And they want to be courted, and he's just like, I don't have that. I don't have patience for that. It's like it would in a foreign country. It's like you wanted a girl, and she wanted you, and it was clear. You just did it. But
And then it was done.
it was done. It was like that was it. Solved. But because those girls have no concept of war. They live in a very fertile state, in a happy land, where, the GDP is doing great where they are. They're like, our gross domestic product here in Oklahoma with this fertile farming is going great. There's some war happening somewhere, I think. And then so when Krebs comes home, they're just, even his family, like it's somebody that I think, maybe I don't know if it's in this class or different, but, so, it doesn't really matter. I always just said the comments I said to everybody anyway. But somebody said, oh, it's a different class. But somebody said they thought the family did a fairly good job with Krebs and like treating him, pretty well. And I thought they did an awful job.
Yeah.
I mean, I just thought when I look at like the way they're treating him, they're just like, I don't know. It's just he'd been through something significant, seeing tons and tons of people die, and maybe it's because the churches. A lot of people were going to churches back then. It was more ubiquitous, I think. I mean, we do have a lot of Christians here, but I think that atheism was something. If you said you were an atheist, you're like, oh my gosh, we have an atheism in the family. It's almost like saying, these days, like maybe 20 years ago, when somebody said like, yeah, I'm gay, you're like, good Lord, don't tell. We get to keep this a secret. And if the coming out, parties weren't a thing. It would be like that with an atheist. We have an atheist in the family. Oh, good Lord. What do we do? How are we going to survive?
Tell nobody.
They tell nobody, yeah. Whereas now it's a little more accepted. I feel like it's sort of like he's not able to communicate. They just expect that he'll just be able to come back into the fold of American life and there's going to be no problem. They're just like, okay, so you went there, you did that thing. Okay. Now it's time to, if you want, you can borrow the family car. Like, he's like, not to be crass. I'm gonna be crass for a second, but I think this thought was in his head where he's like, who gives a shit? Like, who cares at all about the family car now? It's something I cared about when I was 16 or something. But like, who cares? Like, it does not matter now that I've been through what I've been through. I feel like I've always thought this moment is very clear when, like, has anybody seen the Lord of the Rings films?
Yeah.
And the first, like, beginning, they're all, like, super happy fun. Yeah. They're like,
the second one,
they're like, oh, hey, buddy. Hey, other buddy. And then, like, suddenly this ring thing happens, and they just kind of end up going on this journey together. But you can see, like, what Pippin's like stealing carrots or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like watermelons. I don't know. Like, and he's like, "Oh, I sat on a carrot," and then like the things come and everything is like dramatic. And like the very end, they all come back together at that little like pub, and they're all just sitting there like.
You know what I heard? That whole scene.
They're
was
like
actually the director's idea. It was not in the book.
What, them just kind of looking around at everybody having a fun, happy, good fun time.
In the book, I think the Hobbit town got completely obliterated. Like the orcs came over and kidnapped everyone and like it was just gone.
Well, that wouldn't.
I haven't read the book myself because I can't get past the first book. Because the first book is so boring.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, but I hate reading history, and they just read like history books to
Yeah.
me, so I've never managed to go through them. I did take a class on them once, and I said that I read them, but I didn't. Yes.
Half the book is just so
Was
dirty.
Lord of the Rings the series or the movie, like the series of movies where a Starbucks cup got left on the table?
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
I don't even know.
It's the one ring to rule them all.
Yeah, it's like there's a ring, and then like there's power in the ring, but
I know too much.
they went through something so like hard to understand for anybody to really even contemplate that they come back to their town and everybody's kind of just having a good time at the pub like they used to, and these four hobbits are sitting there and they've been through some stuff. Like they each went on their own little journeys too. It was like Frodo and Sam, and then like Merry and Pippin. They were on their own stories. And Frodo. What'd I say? I said Frodo and Sam, right? Okay.
You said Frodo.
But they all come back together and they're in this little pub and they're like, we just can't live in the world in the same way anymore. Like this banging cups together and drinking a beer just isn't what it used to be. Like there's more to life than this, and we've seen how bad things can get. And if it gets so bad for Frodo that he goes to
with the elves.
Yeah, and it's sort of like Valinor, which is like apparently like a heaven you can just go to. Like the world is like you just go there when like you're done like living the normal life here. I'm not really 100% sure, but he just chooses to go because there's like nothing left for him here. Like he's like, I can't.
Span so long, they're like, no, I'm just done with this. I'm just gonna go here now.
And there's a really good movie like that's not this movie, but a movie called I think Brothers that has Jake Gyllenhaal and Tobey Maguire. Jake Gyllenhaal played Mysterio in Spider-Man Far From Home. Tobey Maguire played the old Spider-Man.
Whoa.
The one where the Spider-Man movies
That's
just
meta.
yeah. They actually made like a whole meme set. I saw like a video of it. It was really funny. But those are the actors. But they were in that movie, and essentially like this guy, he's all like a happy dad and stuff, and then he goes off to war. He's like a prisoner of war for like a couple of years. Finally gets found, brought back, and he's just not the same. And his brother actually fell in love with his wife because he said, "Promise me you'll take care of him." And it was very much like a Pearl Harbor scenario, but like far better done. But he ends up stepping back because the dad's back. He's like, okay, I'll step back. But you can tell like they had, I think, maybe been together a couple times, but in that time, but that he had never fully gone through with like starting a relationship, I don't think. But still, it made the whole scenario when they came back awkward, and everybody just kept expecting Tobey Maguire to be normal again, and he couldn't. And I feel like the same thing happens here with Krebs. I think it's very important too that his mother calls him Harold, but he's always called in the story what? Krebs. So that he's no longer Harold. He's forever Krebs, the soldier, called by his last name. And I think it was Daniel who mentioned the title, right? Yes. Soldier's Home, which I think you said, is he really home? Like it almost sounds like the soldier is home, right? Is he really home? And I think your implication was what, that maybe his home...
He was alienated.
So he has no home?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That where he came from before, that's not really home. Home as it existed for him before is not really home anymore either. Not going to borrow the family car. Room's not the same. Maybe it's because instruments are different now than they were then, but I kind of felt it was weird that he was like, all I want to do is like sit and look at girls out the window and then play my clarinet. And I was like, play your clarinet? Like nobody wants to do that.
Do that?
Maybe when there's no phones or something, I guess. But,
Squidward likes to do that.
huh?
Squidward?
No body, yeah. See, he's not even a vertebrate. But so I also think too that it could be considered an apostrophe, like for possessive. So it's like soldier's home. Like, where is the soldier's home? Is there a soldier's home? Or it could be the soldier is home. Or is he really? And I think that's how we're meant to read it, is the soldier's home. Or this is his home, or what is his home, or there's all kinds of different ways of reading it.
Or does a soldier have a home?
Right. To make sure we get to Omelas, I think we should move on to Omelas.
Great transition.
And then, but there's no transition.
Speaking of
Who said the thing that was really Chastity did? And it was on there, everybody could see it, so it's not like I'm saying, like, giving any information away. But you said, and this is something I think a lot of people forget when they read the story, is that when you read Omelas, she keeps saying words like perhaps, or if you will imagine this, so that it's not meant to be like, when she mentions like the thing, I've had a lot of students take problems with like Druze, which is like the drugs there, or like the religion. She's saying like, no, whatever it is that you need to imagine that in your head becomes the perfect utopia, that's what you're supposed to imagine. So maybe there's this, maybe there's that. It's up to you to decide whether or not that would be in your utopia, but whatever it is, that's the thing. I thought that was not a lot of people mention that, but that's very important, is to remember it's supposed to be your utopia in understanding this whole situation. Not necessarily what she says.
I had no idea what was going on up until the point where they started talking about the little boy. Like, I was so confused. Like, the entire first half of the story. And then we got to that point, I was like, oh, makes sense.
This story made me feel so, like, it actually made me rage at this story. It's like,
It made
they mentioned the part of, so you sacrifice one person, would you sacrifice 1 million people's happiness for one? It's like, yes, it's a child. We're supposed to protect children, and they're not protecting this child. They're making it suffer, and I was so angry.
So if it was an adult, would you feel differently?
What?
If it was an adult, would you feel differently?
No, we're still supposed to treat, then the situation would change to, we're
Why do you
supposed
think?
to treat
I think
adults
that's
like
why.
humans.
I think that's why a lot of some of those people would like. They would after they saw the child, they just left.
They left.
See, I would leave because I
I
couldn't
was just
handle
one of
it.
those people, I'm like, no, this is ridiculous.
It made me try. The story made me try to figure out like what kind of person I would be if I was in that situation, and it really kind of upset me.
Well, see, I thought, because when I was reading it, it kept saying the words like, think about this, or I'm scared you think that this is a good place. And so I'm like, great, something's gonna be bad about
Something's
this.
gonna be bad.
I thought there was something wrong with the kid before she said that he had to stay locked up for other people's happiness. I thought he was like a psychopath or
That's
something.
what
that
it
they
seems
let
like
him
at
out.
first,
and
but
he
then
was
once
gonna
it
kill
says, like,
Even the kid even says, "What did I do wrong?"
Yeah,
it's awful. When it first told me about it, it's like the kid remembers its mother's face.
Well,
So
he was
it's an older child enough to remember that at least. But it's just,
Awful.
it's so sad. The poor
She
thing
said-
is so dehumanized.
She said that the kid was like, I'll be good, and that was part of what made me think that he was a psychopath.
But you never know.
I don't think you're supposed to. I'll go ahead and come out and say I don't think you're supposed to think that that's the case.
I think the reason the kid was saying I'll be good is because he thought he punished for something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just didn't understand.
Probably did something wrong.
Yeah, when you punish a kid, they say, I'll be good, I promise I'll be good. And so that's what this kid was doing.
I just want to
because-
know. Yeah. I want to know where they got this
What
idea
is
from
funny?
because they said it was part of some deal.
Okay.
Are you alright, Miss Nichols?
What?
Oh.
What is happening right now?
Are you alright?
Nothing. My wife, she said, make sure you keep the phone where you can see, like, so I've got my phone, I usually have it in my pocket, but I've got it sitting here. She said, make sure you keep the phone where you can see, because we're possibly getting our pipes replaced, because I don't know if you remember from 1301 how I had the flooding problem. Well, another thing that happens is we have old clay pipes underneath the ground, and so roots grow into them, and it constantly, like twice a year, we have to get instead of PVC. So we have to get them like the roots like cleaned out, because roots from the bushes like grow. It doesn't matter if we take the bushes out. There's roots from something that go all the way down into our clay pipes, and then they stop everything up, and we have to get them cleaned out like twice a year. Every time it happens, I was like, oh my gosh, how could we get? Oh, this is horrible. I'm like, well, it happens twice a year. Like we expect it. It's gonna come. And we always say this is the time we're gonna replace the pipes. But I think this time we might actually do it. So she's got the guy there. She said, make sure you've got, so you can approve any like amount, like if it comes, because if it's, she just wants to say yes, but I can be like, if somebody says $5,000, I can't do that, you know. So she sends me something else instead, related to that, something along with, and I expected an amount, so I look, and it's not an amount. It was something hilarious, which I can't tell you. I can't tell you because I feel like it's not something she wants me to share, but.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, so that's why I was laughing. Is she told me something that came out of the whole, I guess, I don't know, like when he was digging or whatever, somehow he discovery. But it was really funny what she. I'm not gonna go further. Moving on. You're not gonna find it. It's really not important that you do find it. It's important that we continue talking about this child. So more about child.
I understand why everybody in that town is happy, knowing that, like, even in the story they said that, like, we tell our children this just so they're aware, but everybody in the town's happy.
So you don't understand how they can be
I
happy.
don't understand how
Yeah,
they
it's
can.
I
like-
couldn't be happy. That's why I
You know what they say? What's it? Ignorance is bliss.
Oh
Yeah.
no, hell no.
Everybody's
Ignorance is
ignorant.
bliss.
I know I think they're. Forced
Well, they're not ignorance.
They are ignorant.
They all have to at some point see the kid.
They're willingly ignoring it.
Yeah, like
They're
more like
feigning
an
ignorance.
feigning ignorance. That's it.
But I want to know where they got this idea from, because the story says, this is the pact, this is the deal that was made. Like, deal with what? With some
The devil.
divine being? Tell me.
100%.
It's one of those like philosophical problems. I think that you're not really supposed to consider what is the origin of this problem. Like, is there a demon who's cut a deal? I think you're supposed to. All you really have to do is understand that if the kid is not in that room,
It's going to be
everybody becomes
and everyone,
on varying levels of happiness
Yeah.
again. Some people might be happy, some people might be dreadfully sad. Some people may even have it worse than the kid, but we don't know that. We just are told about this kid's scenario and what his scenario is like, and whether we would be able to sit by or leave.
Well, what if this kid dies or something? Do they just grab another kid? And
Yeah,
stick him
the
in
story
there?
says that.
I imagine you could. If the kid dies, they replaced.
Oh my
The
god.
story says that people who just end up dealing with the fact that this is how it is, they come to the realization, if it's not this kid, it's gonna be the kid who's playing the flute, it's gonna be this other kid, it's gonna be another kid no matter what we do.
Here's the real question. Why does it have to be a kid? What keeps them from being an adult?
Well, because the kid can grow into an adult and they'll live longer.
Exactly.
Because
Like what keeps the kid
kid probably
Because
just
I mean, they are feeding him.
And then part of the reasoning
Exactly.
was, well, we have this kid and this is the life that he's had sitting in this basement.
That's all he's known.
That's all he's known, so if we pull him out, that's actually worse for him. That was one of the reasons.
I can see that.
the fact that
Like
they
what's gonna
always
make
be
sure that the kid is
kids
actually
who
happy when he gets
is-
pulled out? What is gonna stop him from still being upset and depressed and everything else?
Because then he would.
I mean, sometimes you take a fish from the bottom of the ocean and you pull it to the top and it explodes from the pressure. You never know. Maybe the kid just can't handle the world after having lived in it in a different
And
way.
the fact that it always being a kid is, the kid probably didn't live very long because it's sitting in its own feces. like it's probably getting diseased and sick and dying, so they just pull another kid because kids are easier to contain and to restrain.
Yeah, adult would be
Yeah,
a
I'm
lot
not sure
harder.
how the kid is chosen. In fact, it may even be that it's always the same kid forever. I mean, does it mention that the kid grows old and they replace it? I don't think it does.
I don't think it does.
As long as we know that in this moment that we're there's a kid there.
The
And
kid actually never gets older, and just always stays the same.
I mean, we don't. I doubt it's an immortal kid. Really, I think it doesn't matter. What it needs to be is whatever it takes for you to imagine that this is a possibility. Whether the kid is replaced, whether it's an immortal kid, whatever is the saddest version of the kid, I think is what you're supposed to imagine. The sad and lonely and disenfranchised, and every once in a while even seeing people come and they're looking at him, and then he just goes right back in and he's like, I want that life, and that's what we're supposed to imagine. I think that like it's more supposed to be like a thought experiment than really figuring out how exactly does this work, because of course it's not going to work in exactly this way no matter what. What I find interesting is everybody says how there's no way they could live there. I also find it interesting how nobody's mentioned yet that the thing that in my other classes they've always mentioned this. Nobody said this on discussion posts either, which I mean they wanted to figure out like, well, why does nobody just save the kid?
Yeah, I was wondering that too.
Because if that goes back to the quote here, if it's not that kid, it's gonna be another one. And would you want to be responsible for ruining
What if it is your own
everyone's
child?
happiness?
Yeah, exactly.
You ruin everyone's happiness, they're all gonna come after you.
What if it was your child? Would you just let your child sit in there so everyone could be happy?
No, I ruin everyone's happiness, but I'm not in the story.
A lot of people, I think that's the main thing. Is a lot of people like, well, it's not my child. I don't know who child it is, but it's not mine.
Yeah.
So as long as mine's not in there, I'm happy. That's probably one reason why a lot of people just accept
They
it.
just
That's how
leave
it
it
is.
'cause
Which is awful.
it's
It
gonna be
is
another
terrible, but I mean, if you think of it from that perspective, I mean, I think a lot of people would do it because it's like, hey, we have all this quote unquote happiness
Yeah.
in this place, and everything's going the way we want it to. Why should we change it for one person?
Well, what about the people that walk away though? Because they could at least,
They
if
just-
they're leaving paradise anyways,
That's one thing
why
maybe
don't
not too. They
save
wouldn't.
it?
It's like if
true.
you're leaving, take the kid. Try and get the kid with you. If you're mad, just get the kid out of there and take him with you.
I find it interesting that she doesn't. I think the people who try to think like, why don't we save the kid? I think always that's kind of I don't know if it's an American concept or what, but it's trying to turn the whole idea from a sad science fiction film, which is what it is, into an action film where we save the kid and we get him out of there and boom, everybody's saved and everything's happy, and bad guys don't win and the good guys do win.
I don't know. You'd probably get killed before you get near the kid or get the kid out of there.
And they have no weapons.
That's big.
And they have no soldiers. So what would they? Well,
You want to try and fight an angry mob?
They may only have no weapons and no soldiers because there's currently no need, and once somebody takes the kid and the whole situation's
It could be
kaput,
fine.
then it
Yeah.
turns into war and everything else that
Yeah.
people usually have.
Yeah, no limits at this point.
But I
Or just one stick.
I find it interesting that everybody says that they're. So would you leave if you say like you just couldn't be there knowing this is going? Would you leave? Is that what you would do then?
That's what I said.
If I hadn't grown, it's like I'm trying to think of this because in this life, like if I grew up with all these experiences now, if I found out a kid was being stuffed into a basement and tortured in this perfect utopia, I'm like, no, it's dehumanizing. But then again, you have to think the people have grown up in this perfect utopia their whole life.
If that's how you grew
That's
up,
what they know.
and if that was acceptable and how you were raised and how it was acceptable, you might not want to
And
leave.
it
because, I
says,
mean,
yeah, and it says when they first see the kid, they feel disgust, which they didn't know existed. They didn't know the feeling of disgust and anger and sadness.
Yeah.
So when they do it, it's like, it's hard for me to say if I would do it if I had grown up in that perfect utopia.
right.
I would
You may
like-
even look at the kid as with that sense of
Yeah.
disgust.
Right.
I would like to believe I would help the kid, but at the same time, I don't know.
It's hard. It's really hard to know because none of us, I don't believe so, or we're in that type of environment from
Yeah.
birth.
Right.
So it really truly
Yeah.
depends on your
It's-
own experiences.
Yeah.
It's a good story. It really makes you think about exactly what if scenarios.
I hate the decision that I'm forced to make, which is either live here or leave.
Yeah.
And there's nothing I can do for the kid. Honestly, I think if I was in the scenario, I'd probably end up just living there. Because I'm not saying out of a decision. I'm saying more like Jamie, where it's like if I had always been here,
It's what
I'd
you're
probably
used to.
find some way to think of the kid as somehow deserving of this, or like how am I going to take away every single other person's happiness in this entire city for this kid? Like I can't make the decision for them. Like even if I do feel bad about it, it's me like playing God, trying to decide that I know more for what they need than they do. Yeah.
What's the point
That's
of keeping the kid if another one's going to be put into place?
And see, where's that line? Because I don't recall seeing that. If you can find that line,
Which line?
I really like it. The one about another kid's going to replace the one that's gone. Because I don't remember ever seeing that, but it could be there. I just don't remember seeing anything like that in there.
So if that is the case, then why not just put the one guy that's already gone through it all, versus having to put another kid through all?
I just got the implication that if the kid is taken out, everything falls apart. It's not another kid replaces it. It's that the whole scenario doesn't work anymore. I assume if the kid dies, then the kid maybe is replaced. But it's not like if somebody takes the kid, then the whole society falls apart. I don't think that the kid is replaced.
They made a plan for someone to say, well, what if I just take the kid?
And I feel like the author must have known that that's a possibility, but she intentionally left it out.
Mass hysteria.
Which I find is very interesting because.
I think I misinterpreted the line.
Oh, okay.
I misinterpreted it.
Okay.
Not bad.
What is the line?
Because I just wanted to make sure, because to me that sort of changes the whole, not the whole meaning of the story, but a good portion of the meaning of the story.
It's talking about if the child wasn't there, their happiness would be gone. So like the flute player wouldn't be there to play his happy music.
Right.
That, they would take another child and show them in the dark.
Gotcha. But instead it was just like, if the kid's not there, then the happiness isn't there either. Okay.
I still think that would be a thing though. If that child wasn't there, there'd be another child in there because there was apparently a deal made.
I've always found it strange, and I've thought about this story a lot, of course, but I feel like if I was in the moment, I would choose, and this is thinking of me now as I am, which I'm usually like a logical, rational person. Like I can't make the decision for others; they have to make the decision themselves. If they're not, like I'm not gonna. If I leave, it doesn't solve anything. I don't know. See, that's where the decision gets difficult.
Become the caretaker of the child and just secretly care for it.
It makes me think of like the leaving people, or like like every single time there's a presidential election, there's always somebody who Googles how to move to Canada or how to move to some other country, right? Every single time there's an election, how to move to such and such country. But I feel like that always sidesteps the issue. And I don't know if she intentionally thought about loving your home. Like if she doesn't mention anything about loving your home, like this utopia's got to be something that's you love. Right? This place, your home, where you grew up. And then at one point, when you're old enough to understand, then you're shown the kid. When you've already fallen in love with where you're from.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in love with freaking Commerce, Texas. It's not even that great. But I still love it because it's my home. But in this case, if they were to decide to leave, that's just like leaving your home. And like you can't make the place better from the outside. And I always thought the same with like people who say, like, I want to move to Canada. Like, you're an American. You're not Canadian. If you move anywhere else, you're still not making America better. If you really honestly feel like leaving to go to Canada or some other country, like wherever you would want to go, like I don't know where people said they wanted to go, like when Obama became president, where would you go if Obama became president? Like where would you go instead? I don't know if there is an equivalent on the other side.
Healthcare is really hard to get like a quick doctor.
I moved to Texas.
Canada. That's the case with my uncle.
But again, it doesn't make a lot of sense to move to Canada because like all you're doing is taking a vote away from America to go back the other direction when you want to later make it better. So it makes no sense. To move to Canada is pointless. Saying like leaving seems to me to be pointless.
Yeah.
To stay, maybe you could positively affect things, but what we're told here is there is no way to positively affect things. It's always going to be this way. There's nothing you can do to change it. You can live here or you can decide to not live here. And I think maybe when I became older, when I'd had some time to think about it, and if everybody's happy all the time, the only people who aren't happy are the ones who spend too much time thinking about this, which I think I probably would eventually do. But I doubt I would even try to leave until I was like in my 40s or 50s. What I find interesting is everybody always says how there's no way they could put up with this. There's just no way. We put up with a lot more for a lot less right now.
Yeah.
Every damn day. And everybody's like, I could not live in this scenario. If you just look at, I mean, what is what we can all acknowledge?
What's like a what?
I feel like so many issues that I could mention are going to be political issues.
Most likely.
I mean,
The clearest one right now that I think a lot of people feel bad about, everybody's like, immigration needs to be taken care of, but I think almost everybody's pretty upset with the child detention issues. People are like, think it doesn't matter who you say, well, this kid came here illegally. He didn't know that. I mean, it's like my dad brings me on if my dad puts me in the car and throws it and said, come on, we're gonna go out and do a little family thing, and he robs a bank. They gonna throw me in prison because oh, you were complicit by being in the car with your dad. No. You crossed the border. You're like, I didn't know it was illegal. Dad said, hop in the car. And I just walk across this field. Where are we going? I don't know, but follow that guy with the flashlight. And it also sort of ends up where you're across the border and now you're separated from your parents. I feel like everybody feels like that's not that great, right? We feel like that's not the ideal scenario. We would love to be able to fix that. And that's a bunch of damn kids. That's a lot of them. And we're doing it for not even that great of it. We're doing it for semi-happiness, right? We're doing it for kind of happy. We don't all have the big house we want. We don't all have everything we need. But we're complicit in that. We know we do what this kid, we know he's innocent, but like you said, you'd probably find some disgust with the kid. It's well, he probably deserves this.
Yeah.
Right? We do that every day. We do that here. There's all kinds of other political issues that I think don't work as well, but that one works pretty well for this. Because a lot of people acknowledge the parents came across the border, that's their fault. That you're going to be subject to the laws of a new country. Regardless of your political beliefs, I think you can understand that somebody who crossed the border would be subject to the laws there. But for the child, there's really no decision in the matter to then be subject to those laws and be separate from their parents. It's people have a problem with that. It doesn't matter their politics.
The people who frustrate me are the ones who tell the child, well, you had a decision. You chose to do this. And I'm if my parents tell me to go get in the car and go with them, I'm gonna go. I guess technically I have a choice, but it's either
but the kids
get
trust
left
their parents.
The
or
choice
get in
becomes
trouble.
more evident when you become an adult.
Yeah, not when you're 12 and under.
I'm not sure I ever made a real choice in life until I became about 25.
Right?
Everything before that I feel was just sort of following the lead of my parents. And then I got to an age where I could actually make a decision. I went, oh, I can actually just decide what I want to do now without having to ask permission.
Exactly.
Because you still even 23, 24, you're out of college for a few years and you're you're supposed to just start your life and get a house, get a place, and you're just
Mom.
I was married with a kid and I was still what do I do? What's next? How do I make this crappy situation not crappy? How do I make this better? Because it was I married, the wrong person. And I was just well, devotion. That's what I learned in church. Devotion, stay devoted. And that did not go that well. I want to be honest with you. The devotion, while I ended up, I guess, working out in court case, and I ended up getting custody of my kid, the actual, just find someone and stay with them, and it didn't make me happy. It wasn't a happy scenario, and so that didn't fully work out. And I felt that whole time, even the decision to get married, I felt I did because not because my parents said do it. It was because they were high school sweethearts and they got married. So I thought, well, I better get married. And I'm a little more mature. I waited till college to find the person, but knowing somebody 7 months and getting married was oh, let's just do this because that's common to what my parents did, and then didn't work out. I felt I never made a true decision until all of that was over and I met somebody new and she was you should do this, and I was why would we do that? This is because that's what you do. And I was is it? And so I started actually considering possibilities between two different scenarios, and I was oh, okay, I'm starting to get it now, what decision making is and being your own person. And it's sort of it took forever to come to that point. It really is. You're sort of a little parent mini-me, unless your parent really sucks and you become a parent, an opposite of a parent mini-me, a mini opposite of parent, until you finally realize there was some stuff your parents had right and some stuff they had wrong, and for you, then you raise your own kid and turns out they don't want to do what you're doing, but you're but I came to my decisions. This is all right. And they're but you're wrong about this. What? Everybody feels
Are
like,
you struggling with that right now?
Huh? not necessarily. My kid's pretty good, but there was a moment where she said, I don't even know if I want to go to college. And I was like, first of all, shut up. And I'm not one of those parents who's like, it's because I said so. Like, I just over explain. Like, well, listen, it's about the options. It's not about the
As long as you
degree.
get an associate's in something, there are plenty of jobs that will hire you just look you go,
Yeah,
oh, you have a degree? Oh, it's in
That says a lot.
sciences? Well, this is a business thing, but you have a degree, we'll train you.
I mean, let's say like you decide, I'm not going to go to college. I'm going to be an artist. Let's say that doesn't work out. Now you're like 25, and it's harder to go to college for the first time. You know, it's difficult to make that happen. So I just tell her, look, get you're basically putting yourself up where like, like in a video game where you max out your character skills as early as possible.
Yeah.
And then you can beat as many villains as you have to. Like she was like, I'm not going to worry about character skills at all. I'll just run around and do stuff. And then she wants to go to the max level later, and she's getting her butt kicked. She's like, what happened? It's like, you never went and maxed your skills. You gotta get your skills.
If you want to beat
Can you say it one more time?
Dragon
You said it
Skyrim.
But I find it, and there's all kinds of things that we benefit off of here, are there
Life
not?
doesn't have cheat codes.
I know, but games do.
There's a ton of stuff that we benefit off of the backs of others all the time. Like, that's probably the clearest scenarios where we're like literally seeing children deal with that sort of scenario these days. But there's other scenarios that are a little less cut and dry. But that's one where I see it happen every day. There's kids in the detention centers by themselves. There's some kids are dying, and we're just like letting it happen. We're not leaving. We're not doing anything about it. We're just complicit in it. It's just so strange. Yet when we see this story, because it's that perfect little like math equation, we go, no, I would never stand for this.
But
Standing for it every day. And for not even that much. Like for going to Chick-fil-A maybe like once a month. Or more if you work there.
I've been there for 4 years and I've been sick of it for 2.
Like I read an article and I go, man, look what they're doing to these kids. Damn it. Scroll. That's a funny video. And like then it's like gone, right? It's horrible.
Yeah, it makes me really mad, but I don't know what I can do about it.
Right, and we all feel like, oh, I'm just so small, like I could never do anything.
it's just such a small thing, and I'll be so
I can't do anything. What am I supposed to do? Leave? And then you go to Canada, and then there's nothing really. There's the problems you have with things in Canada, and you're like, well, I guess I'll leave Canada. Like, then you just end up like I don't know in a dinghy on the ocean, floating around, catching fish. Have a good day. Have a good one.
He's a English teacher over there, teaching English here.
No, it's time is up. We can go and go. And we'll try to get some paper menagerie in next time before I start talking about critical analysis.
no rush, but I'm leaving.
I will say at least one more thing next time about Omelas, because I think there's another way of putting it where sometimes people are like even more willing to say, oh no, I would go through with this in a different scenario. I just have to remember.
All right.
I know, I just have to remember to say it. People are like, literally, I would be willing to go through it. Like, because I can kind of convince people next time that you would be. You're like, I would totally do this.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
With the quizzes, if you miss a quiz, like something happens with it, if something wasn't working for you, I'll need you to email me that you need a quiz open and exactly which quiz, and I can do that. I changed the way the quizzes appear. Like I think I told y'all that I changed the way the quizzes would appear in Blackboard. I've changed it back because it turned out that if I did it that way, anytime anybody needed a quiz open, I couldn't do it anymore. So I just went ahead and reversed the way I had it before. Especially since I had students tell me, well, we've always been able to see our quiz grades. And I was like, really? But students have told me they couldn't. And I said, no, we have. And I realized what was happening was the students who had done no quizzes said they couldn't see in their grade book any quizzes. Because they hadn't done any. But if you do them and you miss 1 or 2 here and there, like you see a grade for quiz 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, you know you missed 4 and 7. That was the numbers I didn't say, right? I think so. So you know which ones you didn't do, but if you see like nothing and you didn't do any of them, then that's bad. So I just went ahead and reversed it since people can see the grades they have done. Just so you know, I'm going to start talking about how to approach critical analysis a little bit on Thursday, either before or after paper menagerie discussion. Then I'll continue how to approach the critical analysis essay on Tuesday of next week, because I want people to like kind of know what I'm expecting and like how I would approach it. Because usually I think that helps people like kind of know what direction they should go. Because I think a lot of people are just looking at like, so I pick a quote and say what about it, because it seems kind of broad. Are there any other questions before we move on? Yes.
When's that analysis paper due?
The critical analysis paper is due week 5, day 2, so next Thursday. I can't remember if the second paper is the one that I usually grade first before the 1301 kids, or if it's the next one. I don't know, there's one point at which I switch to you guys. I think it's actually when I do the Antigone essay, because they're almost all the same and they're easy to grade. And then I mow through those. But I think on critical analysis, since they're so hard, I still do the 1302 papers first. And they're just hard to grade because I have to make sure people do like certain stuff. But today, I think we're going to talk about Soldier's Home first. What would you like to say about Soldier's Home?
That story was interesting.
It was interesting?
Yes, in a way, because it kind of, like I said at the discussion post, it kind of helps us understand that they go through, soldiers that move over to fight in the war go through a lot more than what we can understand, and that we don't necessarily end up being their one outlet that they need in order to vent and talk about it. Mostly because, and I don't know if that's because we don't want to hear about the war or what happened over there, or if it's because of something completely different.
Yeah, I don't like in terms of why we can't understand.
Yeah, in terms of why we can't understand, like we do understand that there are horrors out there over in the war, but we can't understand it completely because we weren't there to experience it.
Right. Yeah, I've always thought that that's something strange about, I don't know, I guess the way the mind works is that we can conceptually, like, I mean, literally Krebs could sit down and tell us every single thing he went through, moment by moment, step by step. And I feel like that it wouldn't matter. Like, we still wouldn't get it. Like, we would still, to what degree we could understand, we would. But we still wouldn't fully be able to.
Yeah. And I feel like that they need a better outlet other than their platoon or the people who they served with overseas, because even they have things that they have to sort through in order to go coming back.
I guess there's no way to, like, if they're still trying to sort through and cope with those things, there's really no way that they can fully communicate to us exactly what we need to hear to understand what they need us to understand as well.
Yeah.
Really, the burden's on us to try to understand them, be understanding in their situation, because we're not the ones who went through it. So it's like they went through it, in a sense, for us. So we kind of have to. That's rough. That's rough. There's no good way out of that scenario. There's not. Who was it? Somebody was saying. Might have been Shelby. Like shit, huh? It didn't work? It's weird. I must have tapped it twice on accident. Let's see. Yes. And I don't mean, when I mention this, I don't mean it like, don't feel like I'm, when I disagree with people, it's not meant to like be like, you're wrong. It's just like, I feel differently. Does that make sense? So like you said, like you thought the family did like a pretty good job with him.
Yeah, I didn't mean it like as in they did a good. I think they could have been there for him because like I didn't mean it as in like I meant it for them not forcing him to be there.
Oh, okay.
Like not as in.
Like they weren't everything he needed.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because every time I read this story, like I've always thought like, I don't know, there's the moment in the story where the car, like the family car thing, like they would never let him take the family car. But then all of a sudden she's like, well, you could, you get back to it, start living your life, and you can borrow the car. Dad will let you, use the car. It's kind of like if I thought about like, let's say like when I was 16, and I don't know, my dad didn't have a nice car, he had a mowing truck. And I don't know, some other cruddy little old, barely runs car. But let's say he had something nice, right? It was something like worth taking out and showing people. Like, what would I have liked at 16? I don't know, one of those new Dodge Chargers I think that's out. They look kind of muscly. I don't think my dad would ever drive one of those things because it's impractical. But let's imagine he did, and I liked it because I thought, oh, it looks like a Batmobile. No, that's not the one. Camaros look like the Batmobile. Let's go with that one. Like they look kind of like an old school, like Batman the Animated Series Batmobile, and like the design a little bit. So my dad drives a Camaro, and he's like, you can take the car. And we're like, all right. That would have been exciting at 16, but like after having like lived my life even a little bit, like at 22, like I've gone through college, I've experienced things, and then I come back home and he's like, you can borrow the car, and I'd be like, I couldn't, and that was just after going to college. I was like, I couldn't care less and like anymore about that. It's almost the equivalent of somebody who goes through war, I assume something like that, World War I with like no man's land and dead bodies hanging on barbed wire, explosions, Agent Orange, all that bad stuff. I could imagine that feeling like living like a lifetime or two in that short amount of time. So it'd almost be the equivalent of like me now. Like Dad says, hey, I'll let you borrow the car. And I'm like, I don't care. Like I have stuff to do. Like I got a wife and 2 kids, and like I just literally don't care about that anymore. I feel like there was something like that recently that he like offered. He was like, I got this, and I was like, oh. He was like, you don't like that? I was like, I don't know. I was like kind of old. Like I don't really care about that anymore. He was like, oh, okay. And he got really sad, and I think he drank a lot. I'm kidding. My dad doesn't even drink. I don't know why I said that. Sometimes my brain it goes in directions, so I apologize for that. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So I kind of understand more what you're saying now. Is that like it wasn't like they were giving exactly what he needed or anything, but they weren't overly forcing him to get out and do stuff. Like they were kind of letting him come to terms with it or trying. Yeah. They just still couldn't mask the fact that they were uncomfortable with how long it was taking him. I remember like I appreciated it back in the day, but like when I had we'll take this out of the video. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people die, and then seeing the aftermath and helping clean that up. And then you come home and Dad's like, I'll let you borrow the car. He's like, the car? Who gives a shit about the car? I've seen stuff you can't imagine. And he's like, well, tell me. He could literally tell him every single thing. Be like, well, that does sound really bad, but you need to get a job though. Start building a family. And the guy's like, Dad, like, don't you understand? Like, I don't even think there's a God anymore after what I saw. And he's like, yeah, you'll get over that. It's like, dude, that's what the mom didn't understand, right? She's like, don't you love me? And he's like, no. And she's like, what? And he's like, oh, I didn't. And it's just like, this is so inconvenient. Like, it's not even like he feels bad. He's like, I didn't mean to make her feel bad because I don't want to watch her cry because that's awkward. And he was like, no, I don't believe in God. Oh, no, I didn't mean it. I'm changing my damn it. just trying to say the stuff that'll keep his life from being inconvenient.
He wants so much to be normal for them.
Yeah, that's all he really wanted. He was like, it's like he almost doesn't want to be fussed over. It's like, whatever I have to do to not be fussed over. And he's forgotten what the normal responses are. Hey, God. And he's like, well, I don't believe in God or anything. He's forgotten that that's not normal to say. And he's like, oh, shoot. Don't you love me? No. I mean, yes. It's hard for him not to be, I guess, honest. Like, why would he care about being or not being honest anymore? He's like, I don't want a relationship. Because the girls, they all want to be, like, courted and whatnot. In the other countries, you know, she couldn't speak English. You couldn't speak her language. You could tell you both wanted sex. You had it. Done. It was over. No need for all that fanciful relationship crap. And I do think that this is actually something that's always disappointed me. I don't know if I've talked about this before. This actually may be a little controversial. I feel like the way that art has gone is kind of racist and discriminatory. What I mean is this. Like, we used to have, like, you know, like Shakespeare and stuff, right? White dude. We used to have, like, Chaucer, white dude. We had, like, you know, all these, like, in English at least, all these, like, really great, complicated bits of literature that were not all, like, well off. Like, I mean, Chaucer, he was a middle class guy. Shakespeare built his own company. And there were some people like John Donne, who, like, were poets who had, you know, ties to, like, famous people, and, like, not Blake. Blake was kind of a poor guy, but what do you call it? Like, Lord Byron. Like, he actually, you know, was a lord. So there were these people who were in place who essentially had these positions of power and privilege, and they wrote, like, this high, you know, class, what we would call poetic diction these days, literature, where the diction is very hard to read, very difficult to penetrate. And when you would read it, it literally took, like, you had to decipher it, almost like some people feel when they had to, like, read the, like, old King James Bible, or, like, you know, like the original, and you're just like, man, like, all the, like, I got to figure out, like, what it's trying to say. But, like, even harder because it's poetry and it's condensed, and, like, they made it, like, as efficient as possible and with as high vocabulary as possible. And I almost feel like what ended up happening was, and it's the problem I have in every scenario usually, where what people do, like, to create equality, rather than elevating the lower classes up to the level of the upper classes, the decision's always, for some reason, made to bring things down to the level of the lower classes. Almost like, well, we don't want you touching our things, so we're going to bring it down lower so everybody can play with this lesser version. So I feel like today, like, art and stuff and literature is all like it's spoken English, like the way we talk, like regular, just the plain English kind of stuff. And we've lost, like, that sort of elevated English. And I almost feel like the reason for that was sort of a racism kind of thing. Like, let's make sure this always stays ours, like, sort of like the old, like, white guy canonical artist people said. And so they were like, we'll make poetry more accessible to the people, but almost like as a substitution for not being willing to fully educate the people to bring them up to the level where they can understand. Like, we don't want to pay for people to be educated. Instead, we'll just lower the complication in art so that people who aren't as well educated can understand it, which I always thought was kind of like a racist concept. Like, I want to see, like, I don't know, I just want to see, like, really complicated, complex literature, like, written by minorities and the poor. Or really, ideally we just wouldn't have poor, but when's that going to happen? Good luck. It really hasn't worked out for us. So, I don't know, that's a controversial theory I have about how, wouldn't you like to read, like, a Shakespearean sonnet on the joy of kicking someone's ass in a video game? Like, wouldn't you? Like, normal everyday things. but with a Shakespearean sonnet. Like it's fancy. It feels like fanciful. You know, I feel like explorations of the ideas we see these days are often always just in plain English, but I would love to just see it like elevated, like brought up. Personally. The moment when you sit down to pee and there's no toilet paper, that panic in a Shakespearean sonnet. You know? By the way, sonnets are great forms. It's amazing. It starts with like an intro. Then there's, as a result of what this exposition, here's some, like it kind of turns. I don't know, it's hard to explain. Maybe I should be willing to explain though, right? So there's the 8 lines that are like, they kind of set up the argument. Then the next 4 lines continue that argument, but they sort of turn it. There's some kind of new change, or like he starts saying, it usually starts out like, when this is a situation, as a result of knowing this, now we understand this about the situation. And there's like a conclusion of 2 lines at the end. It's really brilliant and very versatile. Basically, everything gets set up as like a small mini argument. It's amazing. Yep. Soldiers Home. Ironically, I'm talking about Soldiers Home when freaking Hemingway won a Nobel Prize for his literature. And he was praised for, guess what? Making literature accessible to the common man. Because it's in such plain spoken language. Like when you look at it, it's easy to read, isn't it, Hemingway? Soldiers Home, you read it and you're like, I get this. It's easy. Very few big words. Super easy to understand. Literary concepts accessible to everybody. But shouldn't we just better educate all of our people instead of having to force literature down to that level? That's what I think. Personally. But then that would require people to stop caring about just getting degrees. How do we get back to that point? Right? Like, Nichols, why are you going off on these philosophical subjects? I just need this class so I can eventually run my own small business. I will never use this again. I'm going to be a nurse someday. What do I care about being able to adequately understand someone who's been through trauma? That's not useful to me. Or is it? Soldiers Home, right? Yeah, you do. Especially what you told us. Like, yeah, I need that. You probably deal with drama on a daily basis. Or the 5 days a week. Is it 5 days a week?
6 days.
6 days a week?
Or 6 days. I think total hours is 52 a week.
Oh, okay, so you do get, so you do, it is full time and then they give you overtime.
No.
Right?
I'm salary.
That
I
sucks.
just work 52 hours a week. I get 3 days off though.
Imagine if you were a manager though at like a business, you'd have to work 7 days a week, even though they can't technically do it, they would make you. You get how many, what time off?
3 days off.
3 days off?
6 days on, 3 days off.
Oh, okay, so it's kind of like the nursing deal. Gotcha. Why do they do that though? I've always wondered that.
Some places have like 4 days on where you work 12-hour shifts. So it's 4 days, 12-hour shifts. But our unit only does the 8-hour shifts. And I worked 2 12s last week.
Hasn't there been lots of research done that shows that people are very unproductive past 8 hours? Really past 6?
All I did was open the doors for the 4 other hours. I was in Central opening the front gate for 4 hours. It was fine. I had pizza. It was great.
But at some point, wouldn't you get so bored that like you're like, open the door. Somebody's got a gun. They're bringing it to their friend in jail. Open the door. Like I'm not paying attention.
They'd have to go through like 4 different doors and then through me and then through another gate just to get it.
The probably reason they have those 4 different doors is because when they had 3, somebody got lazy and let one person through. It's like add a 4th. Just make it be where there's enough doors where we can,
Somebody will catch on.
What?
Somebody will find out.
Yeah.
Somebody will see
So it'll get stopped at some point, right? That's what we need at schools, right? So there's not any school shootings. Just 4 sets of doors before they get there. Make sure that, like, basically just make schools look like prisons.
They already come.
Right?
Is that been to some schools where they won't let you in?
They already come over.
They like the door locked, you gotta find your way in.
It's just crazy. It's just crazy. This world has problems if that's how we're approaching it.
It took me like 15 minutes to get my kid out of school yesterday. because there was like so many doors I had to go through. I had to go to the front desk. She had to notify the lady. The lady had to make sure she had everything, make sure somebody was able to take her down to the front.
It's like I get it.
Doors to get from the cafeteria to the classroom. It was ridiculous.
Like I get it, but it's silly. It makes the school feel like prison. And if a school feels like prison, they'll start treating it like prison. They'll start feeling like it's a prison.
8-foot gate.
But the middle school principal in Commerce a couple years ago, she instituted she really wanted this to happen. It was like a final period where everybody could just choose some interests they had. And they got rid of like the final period of the day and made it like, I don't know, if you were like interested in dance or art or theater, and you could jump around depending on your interest changes throughout the year. And I was like, that's really cool. Like school, where you learned things you cared about. It was the weirdest concept. And it made it feel like not prison for just a few minutes a day, you know, despite the fact that the teacher's got to spend 12 minutes taking roll, and the class is 34 and a half minutes long, and they have 2-minute and 37-second breaks. Come on. Do you have a problem with that these days? Like, it really bugs me at the public school scenario like that.
Honestly, I think they've done a lot. The one thing that bugs me is the 2-minute passing.
Like, nobody can do that.
It's like, and back in middle school, we had a 3-minute. It was quite a small middle school, and the hallways were small, and everybody trying to get to all their classes, the hallways got pretty crowded, and you really couldn't get to one end to the other.
I had 5 minutes and I couldn't do it. I just don't understand. Like, I just don't understand.
I mean, with I had pretty much all my classes on one end, and then I had orchestra, and my orchestra teacher expected us to be there on time, even if we were on the opposite end of the school, and we had like 3 minutes, and I was like, you're expecting too much from us. Some of us need especially if we need a restroom break, some of us can't get there in the 3 minutes.
That's unreasonable. I mean, I'm not even, students come in late to my class, and I'm just like, probably something happened. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't get like emotional over it.
I think then in high school, I got the 5-minute, and I was fine. I was able to get a restroom break in 2 and finish the restroom. Why the 3 minutes?
I think the problem, and I know this is going to sound weird that I'm somehow relating this, I think the problem is that we're in a world that increasingly, and we're going to read a poem later called Robert Frost, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, where essentially we're all part of this social machine that we can't get out of. That even if we want to stop for a minute and enjoy ourselves, the world's moving and we're just sort of forced to move along with it. Like you just say, I just want to take a break today and just like look at some damn trees or something. You know, like maybe walk through the grass, smell flowers. I don't know. But you've already got all these like, what do you call it? Not commendations, obligations. So you have to meet all these obligations every day. You have to be here and there, and you have to be in school at this time. You have to be at work at this time, and you got to go pick up the kids from school at this time. It's just we have no time to like, enjoy ourselves. And then Krebs is being expected to come into an environment kind of like that, where like, okay, you're supposed to get a family now, and then be a part of the like social machine, and like have a job and like work and do this stuff. And he's like, yeah, well, I was over there like fighting, and I'm even not 100% sure why. There's all these dead people, and people's lungs are melting out of their chest because of chemical warfare. And I'm tired of having to like think about stuff. Like I just want a break. And I kind of get it. And I think it's like you were saying earlier, it's impossible for us to truly understand. There's my Amazon list for a second. Actually, let me do this. I feel like it always thinks I'm in Paris. So this story took place in Oklahoma. I don't know if y'all noticed that. Like it was in Kansas and Oklahoma. So if we look at Oklahoma, we zoom out a bit. There's Oklahoma. Oh wait, sorry. What? Thank you. That's a good point. Sorry, that's the whole world. I just meant to be like, there we go. Oklahoma. So this is where the story is taking place, and kind of a little bit Kansas. Like he went to school in Kansas, but he's living in Oklahoma. Remember, this is World War I. So this is like pre-World War II. They hadn't had the Great Depression yet. They hadn't had Dust Bowl. Oklahoma at this time is just a very, very fertile farming place where they can farm whatever they want because they're not rotating the crops. They're doing it wrong. It's going to ruin everything. But for right now, everything's nice. So he lives here, and he comes back from, like, what? Over in this area where crap's bad. He's in France, and he's on, you know, the fighting's happening there, and so it's really bad. But way over here, there's America. And this is pre-phone days, right? You can't get news immediately. So if you want to hear about something that's going on in the war, you gotta wait till somebody comes home, or like if you can afford a radio for the family. And so that news then has to make its way, you know, across the landscape, or like up from, I guess, Houston, and then get to Oklahoma. And you're like, what happened 3 weeks ago? It just takes forever for news to get there, and they feel really insulated. Like, I mean, even in Dallas area, like, do any of y'all feel especially worried if a country decided to attack us? We've got like a pretty massive military, you know, considering I think that ours is, we spend 3 times as much on our military as China does on theirs, and we have a third of the population. So we essentially have 9 times the military expenditure of China per populace. But if anybody were to like attack us, it has to be with missiles, and we have pretty decent missile defense systems. And if anybody like tried to, I don't know, start a land war with us, like who would do that? I mean, I guess there's a lot of people arguing right now that, like, I don't know, like right here, somebody's gonna ruin America by letting people in, like right here, right? This whole country's gonna be ruined by this little part right there. You know, we could honestly sustain troops landing on our freaking shores. I mean, it's really sad. So America is so damn big that honestly, if troops landed in California and tried to make their way across the U.S., it's so big and so disparate that there'd be Texans going, yeah, hell yeah, they should land in California. Wipe it out, man. Rip it off the map. And be like, damn it, Texas, they're Americans. Oh, I know, but they don't vote right. Yeah, what? Shut up. Just, they're Americans, dummy. So we're just so insulated here in the inside. I don't know if you didn't know this, but like 66% of the population of the United States lives within 100 miles of a major body of water, whether that be the ocean on the left, or the right, or in the Gulf, or the Great Lakes. The other like 33% of the population of the United States lives in the rest of it. 100 miles from the border is like that far. So like, it's like nothing. Huh? It's just because water is where life happens. Like there's fishing, there's boats and trade. It's just so much happens there that we're sort of an anomaly, you know, for some reason. You know, Texans have decided to like live far inland, and like I guess it just exists just by the highway system. But we're so insulated from things here, and we're not even as far north as like say Oklahoma. They would have been so far from the war that even with people coming home and saying, "Here's what the war's like, it's bad," he's like, "You don't understand how bad it is. We should just make love right now because we've only got this one life." And she's like, "I think you should meet my father first, and we should go for a walk in the park." And he's like, "Go to hell. You just keep your little poodle skirt, and I'll just stay on my porch playing the clarinet, watching you walk by." Because that's essentially what he did, right? I don't know if he played the clarinet on the porch, but he was playing a clarinet for fun. Huh? I knew he played the clarinet. I knew he was on the porch. I don't know if he did both at the same time. I'm not 100% sure. That'd be weird if you're like just walking on the street and somebody's like, you're like, what's going on? That actually sounded more like a trumpet, but I played trumpet, so what am I gonna do? I don't know. I just feel like people never really understand the sacrifices that are being made elsewhere. Bad stuff's happening, and I don't know, America too, we just always feel so invincible. Like, what is anybody going to do to us? That we have to invent things to be worried about? There's like 2,000 of them coming in a line up from That is like 1/10 of 1/10 of 1% of the United States population, isn't it? 2,000 people? 280 million people? 1/10 of 1/10 of 1. Yeah, I think that's actually right. It's close. 1/100,000th of the population, and we're worried about it. People all up in arms about it. Like, damn caravan. What are we gonna do? I don't know. Live our daily lives like nothing's happening, because it kind of isn't. And people get so worried about like such little things. How do we even react to a war? It's because we've never had to really deal with hardship here, have we? We're not a country that has to deal with hardship that much. We've got racism, we've got sexism, we've got those things built into our society. We don't exactly have the equality that we need to have, but in terms of like, do we deal with, as a nation, outside things that are trying to attack us, with the exception of, and this is happening, the FBI reported on it, the CIA, everybody, Russian hacking, trying to like affect our like elections and get secrets from us. Other than that, I mean, we don't really have any major national enemies that we feel like are going to attack us in like a real physical way. It's just weird. It actually kind of brings us a little bit to Omelas, which I think people liked a little more. Maybe I'm wrong with that. People usually like Omelas a little more. Soldier's Home is good, but Omelas gives us more to talk about, and I don't just have to stand up here and say stuff. If you would love, I would love it if you just take over. Omelas, go.
I don't see how a community can function by having a child in that situation.
Okay.
I just,
Like, how could anybody
can
live
you
there?
How can you live peacefully within your community? I just can't get past that. I couldn't live in peace. I mean, especially, I have younger children.
Yeah, it's really hard too, knowing that like when you have your own children, like what they would have to be going through.
Yeah, like what the hell are they thinking? I can't get past that. But,
So you would definitely leave?
no, I think I would do something about it.
You would try to stop it?
Yeah, I would try to. I mean, I don't know what the aftermath would turn into, but I don't think I would just leave the child there and, let everyone else just continue living.
So that's the response I was hoping I would get from the other class. I'm not saying that I'm not saying it would work, but I was asking other students, they were like, stay or leave, and usually people tell me what you're telling me,
Yeah,
which is do something about it, like fix it.
Surely there was several people on the same page of, obviously they left for a reason. They were probably not in agreement with that occurring, that happening. So maybe if they all would have gotten together and done something about it, it could have changed the community, maybe start some trouble, because obviously others may not, want to do something about the child's situation, but at least for myself,
You would
definitely would have tried to do something
fix
before just leaving,
Yeah. So for you, there was like a hidden third choice.
Yeah.
Do something.
I think there was, yes, but it wasn't provided in the story.
Right. It doesn't provide that in the story, which is something I'll get to. What did you all think? Would you stay, leave, try to fix it? What was your initial reaction when you read it? Leave?
Not letting that happen.
So not stand by while it's happening. So your initial reaction to the story, would you, now that you've heard the third option, would you want to actually try to fix it now that you think, hey, maybe that's a possibility?
Mm-hmm.
What about others?
I think it'd be hard to try to help because in the story it said if the child was ever shown kindness or love, everything that the town had, the happiness of I don't know how many people would go down the shit. So this perfect world that finally exists would be all go away at the account of one person.
So trying to do something would ruin the utopia, and you'd have lots and lots of unhappiness everywhere, and a degrading of the entire idea of the utopia. So it would become like just any old Like it could be like, what's that country that's having the problems right now with the economy? Like the oil went down and like everything just, huh? It wasn't Brazil, it was another one that was close by. It had like the Hugo Chavez, I think was maybe the guy. Venezuela. Like they had their entire economy tied up in oil. And like essentially, I mean, I think the implications like almost like something like if you ended up having if somebody tried to save the kid, it turns from like this utopia where everybody's happy, with the exception of this one kid, into something like Venezuela, where they're all fighting in the streets, nobody can eat. I always got the sense that it would be a not good place. It wouldn't just turn into like, say, a normal place. Like America, it would almost turn into like maybe like the average country and like the problems it's having to deal with. Well, I don't know if Venezuela is the average, but maybe Brazil's the average, where like they're having some problems with certain things, but there's still a big economy, so they're okay, and most people are able to survive. But there is problems with the value of their currency. Is that kind of what's happening with Brazil right now? It's like not so bad, but it's survivable, but not so bad. I don't know world history as well as I should. I know some. I'm just not.
I know of a housing problem that happened in Brazil where they were knocking people's houses down to make way for different projects. They didn't really give an alternative for the families to go to.
I don't know. Or like maybe like China, where they're dealing with sort of like their president, leader, just removed term limits for a leader, so he can now essentially serve for life. North Korea has something similar, but I consider North Korea to be on the bad end of country situations. China, though, it's got like children who work in some areas, and there is sort of an Americanization of things, but there's still the whole like the government's right and you need to just listen to it. And Russia that calls themselves a democracy, but then ballot boxes get stuffed. It's on camera. Leaders win with 94% of the vote. That's not normal. It's not a true democracy. I would be suspicious if for example, anybody, I don't care if it was Trump or Hillary, if it was 94% of the popular vote, I'd be like, that ain't right. Something's messed up. Like, I would be suspicious at 75%. I'd be like, we can't even get that in the Senate. Like, how are we gonna? We can't get that like divide like where we're just like we're dead even like in lockstep. Like it's just can't trust it. So I always thought that like it'd be some country kind of like one of those. In the event that like you say save that one kid.
It doesn't mention the parents, does it?
Huh?
It does. It says that he does remember a time when he felt the love of his mother, but that was it.
But it doesn't mention like when
whose kid it is.
left them. Yeah.
No, it never
How was he
speaks of
chosen?
the parent again. It only speaks that the kid wants to do kindness, and now it does.
It's almost set up like, have you heard of the trolley problem? There's like the trolley problem is there's like you're here. For some reason your arms are very low by your waist. But I've already drawn it, so whatever. There's a switch on a railroad track. And there's a railroad track. And if you flip this little switch, it'll change the track to where it'll go over here. Right now, there are 5 people on the track. And they don't see the train coming. It's coming right toward them. It's gonna hit them, no matter what. There's no other choice you can make. There's nothing you can do. The only thing you can do is to switch the track. Over here, there's one person. And the question is, do you switch the track? You could yell all you want. They won't hear you. You don't know anything about them other than that there are 5 people on one and 1 on the other. So if you switch the track, instead of 5 people, and it's going to instantly they'll die. It's going to change from 5 instant deaths to 1 death. You don't know if on one track there's 5 doctors, and on the other there's a sexual predator, or if on one track there are 5 sexual predators, and on the other track there's 1 doctor. You have no idea what the makeup is or anything. And the question is, like, do you make the decision? And I think this is more or less how she's trying to set up Omelas, to where you're given a decision. Do you stay? Do you leave? You don't have other options and things like, you can't save the kid. She's not giving you the option. If you save the kid, the whole utopia breaks down. Although I think that is the American decision to make. In the land of the American dream, where, like, I mean, if Omelas were made into a movie, they couldn't do it. It wouldn't work. Because the movie version of Omelas, somebody decides to save that kid and it turns into an action movie.
Oh, there is a movie?
No, there's not.
Oh, okay.
It would never work.
I was gonna say, I wouldn't watch it.
Because somebody would just end up leaving at the end.
If there was.
Like, that's it. That's the heroic decision. And we're like, no, somebody's got to run in there like Tom Cruise and save this damn kid. And then, like, the whole city, like, burns to the ground. But hell yeah, it does, because we saved this kid. You know, that's how the action movie version would go. Or somehow you maintain the utopia and save the kid. You know, it's like, we always want to, like, American dream-wise, we think, like, anything's possible. I can be president. You probably can't. I'll be dead honest with you. Like, if you're not on a track right now where you feel like you're going to eventually be president, you're probably not going to. I mean, shoot, I mean, if you look at, like, President Obama, who are like, well, anybody can become president, because, like, look at Obama, and, like, he came up from, like, having, like, you know, like, was it divorce? Or the dad was out of the picture? I can't remember. That was far away. I don't remember. But it's like he came up and he became like the. But look at his life, and like he marries a girl from Harvard. He's a law professor. He's a lawyer. He's written 2 books. The guy was successful. He was on the way to be successful. He's the exception. He's not the rule. So can you become president? Sure, it's possible. If you're not already on the way to being president, though, if you're not, you're probably not going to. Shoot, do you even want to? That's a lot of responsibility. But like. People who generally become president are people whose families are in oil, or who are rich real estate moguls, or famous actors. It's generally not that it's just some random person who never achieves anything eventually becomes president. That's just not how it works. And I say never achieves anything. I mean, nobody's going to vote for, oh yeah, that Nichols guy. We really like his policies. Isn't he that guy who taught at a rural Texas community college? Totally has the experience to be a president. No. Barack Obama, law professor. That sounds smart. That's a smart thing. And not only that, he's young. A young law professor. So he'd moved up real quick and become a law professor. Like, that's impressive. You know, he's the only president ever to publish an academic journal article while in office. Like, he wrote and published. And, of course, some people I would talk to would be like, wow, that's impressive. Other people would say, yeah, he wasn't working on being president for sure. If Trump published an academic journal article, you'd say, oh, it's impressive. It's not. I hate how some people are like, they feel differently in different scenarios. Like, what if I don't know. I was getting a little too far off on Omelas. But I'm trying to think of, like, different scenarios where people would be like, okay, the kid is a Democrat. Oh, well, I didn't realize that. Kid's a Republican. Leave him. Like, if you got out, what would you do? I'd vote Republican. Or just stay, I guess. Yeah, that should not be anybody's thinking. Like, you shouldn't think like that. It's a kid. Save him. Action movie. The problem is we can't. That's not the problem that's set up. The problem is set up like an old philosophical problem, like Prisoner's Dilemma or the trolley problem, where there is a decision. That's the decision you have to make. You can't change the variables. And the way this decision usually works out is a lot of people will want to make the change because you save more people. More people's better. Other people say, I won't make the decision, even though I think more people being alive would be better because that involves me in this process. Some people think being close enough to make the switch obligates you. Some people think, no, if I wasn't here, fate would mean that these 5 people would die, so I can't murder this one person when this is not murder. This would just be, if I wasn't there, this would happen anyway. So, like, Omelas is like only giving a decision, do you stay or do you go now? Dun, 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 dun. It's a song. It's a difficult decision.
I I didn't even focus on those two choices.
You were just like, I have to save the kid.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just like, you know, I mean, why not switch that child out with another family's child?
I actually have that same question.
You
What
know-
happens when the kid grows old and dies?
Like,
I don't think you're supposed to think about
Gotta
that.
go to college.
I don't
How
care.
does your kid chosen?
Yeah, I
Being
mean, I
chosen.
just-
How long is
I
he gonna
don't
be
know
here?
what
Is it
to
permanent?
do.
And see, it's important not to get too caught up in the actual thinking about what brought this about. It's an academic exercise in essence. Remember when I was talking, like, those of you who took my 1301 class, remember when there was that topic that said the likely effects of a severe protracted shortage of one of the following commodities disappearing, something like gasoline or like net neutrality, Wi-Fi. Like all of a sudden we might not have any Wi-Fi anywhere. But the essay asked you what would be the effects of losing Wi-Fi. And people always want to be like, well, what caused this? Was it like solar rays or like lack of electricity? It's like, don't think about that. Just think about what are the effects. And it's very hard to like not think about, well, what brings this about? How do we fix it? But that's essentially what she's asking you to do. And I understand kind of why, like her parents knew Robert Oppenheimer, the guy who worked on the nuclear bomb. Like her parents, her dad was like a famous anthropologist. I think at Berkeley. And I think her mom maybe also was an anthropologist or was involved in something similar. The author I'm talking about. So she was used to like an academic environment with academic exercises and philosophical thinking, and her parents had these kinds of discussions all the time. So she, wrote a story kind of like that. But she really just wants us to not. In fact, a lot of people don't notice this, and I appreciated one student said something like this. I think they were maybe in the other class, but they put on their discussion post where the utopia was not clearly defined. Essentially, when you look at it, it says, I want you to imagine, and like if it works for you, include this. If it doesn't, don't. So essentially, she wanted you to construct in your own mind using the tools she was giving you and then modifying your own utopia. Exactly. Like, what is a perfect world to you? Even if that might involve some degrees of what you would feel inequality. Like, for example, in your utopia, maybe it's just one race. Because to you, that makes up the perfect. But what she's saying is the perfect world in your mind, whether it could be like a different race. Like maybe you don't like your own race. It's just like, I'm tired of white people. Make it somebody else. But that utopia, yes. She was just saying whatever you imagine as the perfect world, it all hinges on this one child. And could you live in so I guess the real question is, could you live in a world where one child is sacrificing everything for everybody else so that everybody else could have happiness? And if they start to think too much about it, they've always got the option to leave. Could you live in a world like that? Answer my damn question. Don't just think about answer.
What if I could live and just go care for the child myself?
Like go give them sandwiches or something?
Yeah,
If you
like
show them
give
kindness,
clothes
utopia's
and-
over.
It says that any form of kindness is shown to the child and they won't pay off.
And I guess my ass will leave.
That was quick.
That's just terrible.
Others? What do you think? What are you thinking?
I'd leave.
You'd leave?
At least I'm not benefiting from the kids. Structure.
Yeah, I'm not putting
They
that.
can choose to live like that, they can, but I don't guarantee them everyone like that.
I'm seeing some nodding. Does that mean that's official?
Probably destroy the whole system.
Destroy the whole system? I'd say you're actually closest to actually doing that. Because you're in a band. Several. Granted, sometimes it feels like I think being in a band is like you want to change the world, but you kind of feel like what you're mostly doing is like shouting into the wind.
Yeah.
Or pissing on the ocean, You're like, I'm going to fix the world with my music, and it's not really, you feel like somebody just needs to listen to the damn shit. No, he will.
I'm playing a show with a bunch of other punk bands, and the people that are there are people who generally already agree with me. So it's like,
You're like, yeah.
yeah.
You just want to, like, tie somebody to a chair, and they're like, what's going on? Like, you turn on these bright lights, and they're like, listen to this song and see if it changes your political beliefs. Wait, what? What's going on? That's what this is about? It's a very strange method. And you're like, don't question my methods. I'm gonna call BS on all of you. That's not. You would not do that. You wouldn't, because you don't now. There are children laying on concrete floors with foil blankets at the border. There are young children abused by Catholic priests, and have been year after year, century after century. Children have always suffered so that we can live not even a utopia, just an okay life. But when it's posed to us as this problem, yeah, we're like, I would leave. And yeah, sure, Google searches go up at every election for how to move to Canada. Doesn't matter if Trump wins, Hillary wins. People are going, I'm moving to damn Canada. I'll make Canada my play. Why always Canada? It doesn't matter like if they're Republican or Democrat. Everybody wants to move to Canada. It's like, but everybody searches for Canada. It's like I'll go to Canada and make it my own image. They don't have enough voters to stop me.
I can understand liberals saying they want to move to Canada. I cannot understand conservatives saying they want to move to Canada. I'm like, you would fucking hate it there.
I don't know. I feel like any democracy is just one bad election from changing into something else, right? I mean, right now they've got Trudeau, but there's a lot of angry Canadians that are like, I hate how much taxes I'm paying. I hate that this damn son of this old politician is now running things, and he's this super liberal hippie kid. Damn it. You know there's going to be people, and if enough people get pissed off, then the votes change. And people get complacent. That's always a problem, too. I really think that a lot of people just thought that the country was on autopilot. They were like, we elected Obama, we're progressive. First lady president. What the hell happened? Like, I think those people were like, who? The reality guy? What? Why? Huh? And they were just shocked. And I remember watching on the news, and I was like, well, that's not what the polls said. Interesting. But really, I mean, anything can swing any way. But I mean, we put up with a lot less for a lot more for a lot less daily.
Sure.
And some student brought up a brilliant point in the other class. She said, probably if I were in this scenario, I think that I would stay. She says, not thinking the way I would think now. She said, but imagining I was just a part of that society. I'd been born there. I'd grown up there. Thinking about like the way I am with my parents now and how when they say stuff, I generally am like, yeah, I kind of see what you're saying, Dad. I would probably end up being the same way then. And when I saw the kid, I convinced myself that kid was disgusting. There's something they've done to deserve this. And people do that all the time with, I mean, not the, you know, I read recently, there's a theory that guy has. Old Bibles did not have the word, we don't have one kid, and granted we don't have happiness either, but we can, you know, we live with the little that we have now. Yeah.
We all in this room have smartphones, and those phones are generally made possible by cobalt mined by child slaves.
Yeah.
So, but we all have our smartphones.
Yeah, I was reading they're still having problems with cell phone manufacturers, and little kids are like working to put like phones together in these tight scenarios. Like they need lots of workers, so they're using children. But I get to like scroll through Reddit and stuff, so you know it's kind of, you know, because like the things that we actually end up putting out when we're given a problem like this, a philosophical problem, we make the decision like, no, I wouldn't do this. But in practice, like we're very good at, I don't know, like
Not practicing what we preach.
it's
Not practicing what we preach.
in a sense, and I'm not saying that like Elizabeth, you're doing that or anything, but what I'm saying is like it's a lot of times in like real life, the real life is the one we have to live. This problem we don't.
Right.
In the real life that we live, if we just sat around depressed about things all the time and like made every single like social justice issue our personal issue, then we would also have to like put our families aside, and that's hard too. It's a difficult like balance, and like somebody along the way has to make the change and say like this has got to change. And you know, in a democracy, luckily we get to vote for those people, but even then we have to hope that those people actually make those changes once they're in office. I was reading about this the other day. Did y'all know that like after you work as like a politician, like a House of Representatives or Senate or president or something, like corporations can hire you as consultants, and you can work for them for like hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars a year. That's problematic to me Because like essentially you can just once you're voted out of office, you can then use the social networking that you've gotten and keep these corporations still involved for whatever purposes you think, whatever purposes you don't like that corporations are in charge of. Those are the ones. But that's problematic. I mean, it's like essentially it's no longer a sacrifice to be a politician. It's a business prospect. If you can get voted, then you're set for life, right? Because you'll always be able to work as some kind of consultant, always be able to use those network connections you've made and make things happen for whatever company you end up going and working for. It's kind of messed up to me. But it's hard to make those decisions, like those changes on our own, and so we have voting. But it's nice to imagine a problem like this where it's so easy, but our daily lives are so much harder. And we see this stuff happening, but again, we always feel like what can I do? Like I can't go down to the damn border and be like, hey, listen, these shouldn't be sleeping on. They should be sleeping there. Get them up. Put them back with their parents. Done.
It's a good thing it's a discussion that we're having and not actually actioning towards that.
Actually, what?
Like putting it into action, like doing something about it. It's only a discussion that we're having in class.
Right. I mean, it is just a discussion that we're having in class. Like but I mean, it still does like beg the question, like what exactly can we do beyond just like using our voting powers? Like, because sometimes people can, and granted, some people, like I've heard of some teachers who've gone and said, you know what, I'm going to do this, and like they stop teaching, and then they go and try to get elected, and then they try to make the change, and it's just like, that's such a sacrifice. That like I have a kid, and like I would have to like miss them growing up for the sake of everybody else's kids, and that's just so hard. It's like throwing your own kid aside for the sake of everybody else. So your kid will grow up in a better world despite you not being a good parent to them. It's just rough. It's just hard. It's hard for me to do. I don't have the emotional fortitude to do that. Other people might. It's just strange. It's interesting questions though. And thank heaven I'm not being forced to like go out and like actually like, oh, you say you'd leave? Go down to the border now. What? That's not what I meant. I need gas money. That kind of thing. Yeah, fun day. I love talking about this kind of stuff. Hopefully you did too. Did y'all enjoy this? I like this kind of stuff. I don't know. Some people go like, oh, we're just talking about ideas and stuff. Good. I like this kind of talk. If anybody doesn't like this kind of talk, you can email me and I'll consider your thoughts.